Good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to the COVID313 Community Coalition for Families and Youth, and a very, very important town hall today. But before we start, which is going to be a very dynamic program, on a day that is unprecedented of what we have witnessed yesterday and what we have been witnessing in this nation. But we want to make sure that you get a chance to get comfortable and to make sure that you know how to connect to us. Because not only are we always going to bring you expert voices and resources to keep you educated and knowledgeable, because we know that knowledge is power, we also want to hear from you. So if you are in Facebook, please feel free to put your questions or even your comments there. You may also text us at 313-288-2082. Again, that text is 313-288-2082. We really would love to hear from you. Please get settled. We have some more information, and I'll be right back with you in a moment or two. So we want to make sure that you and our guests that are in the Zoom are all settled in. So allow me to introduce myself. My name is Jametta Lilly, and I am blessed to serve as the CEO of the Detroit Parent Network. I'm also a Detroiter. I am a proud Nana, mom, wife, and lifelong activist and seeker and worker towards justice and peace. But that's why I'm so delighted to be a part of this COVID coalition, because our agenda is always to bring to you, the community, information, resources, and action for us to make sure that our community is safe and just. And so today in this program is particularly special. Families, we have witnessed an attempted insurrection as of yesterday. And while that attempted insurrection happened yesterday, I am very proud and pleased to say, in spite of that, the people's will prevailed. So let's be real clear. What happened yesterday? We have had 4 deaths. We've had 4 deaths and over 50 arrests. And now finally, the FBI is going to begin to investigate those who have been inciting hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people across this nation to believe a false lie, to believe that in fact the elections were fraudulent, when they were in fact some of the fairest ones that have ever occurred, but even more importantly, to believe that they had the right to overthrow our votes. That not only is a push and a fight against democracy, it is a push and a fight against our Constitution. So what we witnessed yesterday was an attempt to overthrow, indeed, our Constitution. But again, they failed. However, families, we want to let you know that this fight is not over, because we need to recognize that, unfortunately, in our own state of Michigan, we know that our votes were called into question. We know that our officials, both in the city of Detroit and Detroiters, you showed up and shined in this last election. But those votes not only have been suppressed throughout the country, and we saw this in Georgia, but they have been questioned to somehow say, how were they valid? So again, we see in particular the votes of Black people, Latinos, and other marginalized communities are always the ones that are called into question. And in our own state legislature, in our own state, we have had people that helped to put together buses of folks who descended on our U.S. Capitol and then attempted to overthrow a legal and constitutional process. So we want to let you know that people like Lisa McClain and Tim Walberg and Jack Bergman, we know who you are, and we know that you attempted to create a process that undermines the validity and the power of our vote. That's unacceptable. We also want to let those that have been involved in calling out and questioning the validity of not only Michigan, Pennsylvania, and other states, that we know who you are. And we thank those that finally, at the very last minute, found a smidgen of integrity to stand up for the Constitution and not to be manipulated, not only by this president, but by those who have been complicit. But in the midst of this insurrection and the chaos that we saw yesterday, Georgia is on my mind. Georgia represents something very significant. And that's where we saw grassroots folks come out, not only the Fair Fight organizations, but dozens of community-based organizations, just like many of you that are in our audience, just like our COVID coalition, that worked tirelessly to make sure people were informed, had the resources, and were able to get to the polls. That's democracy in action. And so we are delighted now that we've only had 4 US senators, Black senators, since Reconstruction. And now we can say, finally, we have 5, with Reverend Raphael Warnock being amongst them. We've also seen now the election of John Ossoff, a Jewish American, to the Senate. So we are marching slowly, surely towards the broader dream of inclusion and justice that we know that we're all working for. So having said that, families, we're excited to continue this conversation because we know not only are we have to be focused on social justice and our power, we have to be focused on the pandemic and its impact that we know has been dramatic in its impact of health disparities amongst African Americans, Latinos, Native Americans, and others. So we are delighted today to bring to you the Director for Immunization for the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. We know that education is so important during this process, and as we have always, we're delighted to welcome back Dr. Vitti, and we're also delighted to have the representation for our charter schools, and as always, we will continue to have information for you, health, education, basic needs, all wrapped into this notion that together with our focus on change, our focus on knowledge, and focus on power, that we, the people, can prevail. And we will, but it takes work as citizens. So I'm pleased always to have another wonderful citizen join me in this experiment. And our experiment is basically the COVID313 town hall that has been coming to you now almost 10 months, voluntarily bringing you information to help keep us safe, healthy, and informed. And I'm delighted. Christine Bell, it's good to see you. Who knew that we would be on the air the day after what we witnessed yesterday, which included, if I can just say really quickly, a monumental and vital vision of what white supremacy looks like, because had that been Black Lives Matter, we would have seen a very different scenario and response. So audience, we want to hear from you, 313-288-2082. And Christine, I'm passing it to you.
Thank you, Jametta. Powerful, powerful words from you always. And you're right. It would have looked very different if the people had looked different that showed up yesterday at our Capitol. I'm so grateful for the legislators that stood up for the truth before this terrible event and stood even stronger after, and that democracy really did prevail, and that, quite frankly, my vote counted, and that we didn't disenfranchise millions of voters, most of them being Black and Brown voters. And so in something that is so sad and really horrific, and that I never thought I'd see in my lifetime, that democracy prevailed, the ideals that this country has been built on were not destroyed, but we have a lot of work to do.
Yes,
we have a lot of work to do, and yesterday was a painful reminder of that. We have a lot to work to do as it relates to equity. We have a lot to do as it relates to bringing our country together. and finding common ground, and moving forward so that it is a more just and equitable society for all of us. And that we also repair what we've broken, because we've broken a lot of people and a lot of communities. So that said, stay tuned next week. I have no idea what to say to my kids as I was watching in horror, and my son kept asking, "What's going on, Mom?" I couldn't even, there were no words for how you explain this. But also, as we look forward, how do I make sure that my kids know that what happened, better than I actually did, really? I mean, watching it, I was like, this shouldn't be happening. Um, and, but deeply understanding why it shouldn't be happening. And so how do I make sure that my kids, quite frankly, are smarter than I am as it relates to our process and our government? And so I say all that to say I am deeply saddened about what happened, but always optimistic about how we take this as an opportunity. And like you said, Georgia, it was a bright light in a really dark day. And so I just want to encourage our elected officials, keep fighting, keep ensuring that our democracy is strong, because it really takes us to make sure that that happens, but particularly our elected officials. And I want to encourage all of us to hold our elected officials accountable. But I think one thing you'll always hear is truth, right? And that's what we try to bring you every week, is truth and facts that are rooted in expertise, and also giving you an opportunity to ask the questions that you have, and so that you can better understand what the facts are and what truth is. And so with that, we want to make sure that everyone gets on the right line and get comfortable. Like always, we are going to translate the town hall into Spanish and ASL. So, Ophelia, could you please share the phone number for Spanish translation?
Yes, thank you. Buenas tardes. Si ocupa su traducción en vivo de este video en español, por favor hable al 313-626-7440. Otra vez, 313-626-7440. Hoy la traducción será hecha por Cristina Ruiz y Ofelia Torres.
Julie, it's so good to see you. Thank you, Ophelia. And Julie, it's really great to see you. Could you please share the instructions for ASL? Thank you so much, Julie, and Happy New Year. Forgot to say that.
Oh, right. We forgot to say Happy New Year.
You think we thought that the new year would not bring this, but Happy New Year to everyone.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. We want you all to stay with us for the next 60 minutes so you can stay informed and powerful. And we've got some really good stuff today around COVID and education, and we will not win against COVID unless we do it together. So this will be your time to ask experts your questions. So please text us or put your questions in Facebook chat. We've got moderators that are there. Lindsay and Brooke will be there to collect your questions and pass them along to us. The text number is 313-288-2082. Again, that number is 313-288-2082. We'll have a time for question and answer after each segment. If we can't answer your question today, we're committed to getting the answers to you by early next week. All questions asked today will be posted with answers on onedetroitpbs.org and on DPTV's Facebook page. For our experts, please remember to speak slowly for our translators, slower than I was just speaking. They want to make sure that they're translating the important information that you are sharing correctly. Also, turn off your cameras when you're not speaking to ensure our ASL interpreter can be seen, and mute yourself when you're not speaking as well. Terry Whitfield is our timekeeper. He will chat you your remaining time, so keep an eye on your chat. If you go over your time, Jametta or I will come onto the screen and gently remind you to wrap it up. And it is always my pleasure to introduce our parent voice. And so we've got Cindy Gamboa here with us today, and it is super good to see you. You must have gotten the memo about wearing red.
Yes, look at
Cindy.
this.
Oh, I missed it.
I know. Well, next time I won't use mental telepathy.
Okay.
All right, Cindy.
Thank you, Christine. Yeah, I did get the memo. It's my feel good color. So thank you guys for having me on again, and welcome back to everyone that is watching from home, from wherever it is that you guys are tuning in from. Happy New Year. January always feels like a reset button, like we hit a reset button for some reason, right? It's just the calendar that's starting over, but it's like a sigh of breath of fresh air for me every year. I feel very blessed to yesterday have been able to celebrate Dia de los Reyes with my family. And I know right now people are also in the spirit of New Year's resolutions. And I know, yep, this is the year that we're going to all save money and lose those extra 10 pounds that we've been trying to lose. So yay, you, 2021 is our year. Keep it up, keep that momentum up, that energy up. For me, this year has already felt a little bit different though, right? After the holiday break, my son, it wasn't so eager to return to school as he usually is. And I can't blame him. Now all he has to do is roll out of bed and turn on his laptop. There's no new shoes, ironed uniform, or first day back jitters that he feels. And all of this has been impacting me. It's saddening me. I've been longing for the day for my kids to be able to return back to school and return back to life as usual. But quite frankly, I'm not even sure what that normal or life as usual will look like anymore. I'm glad to be on this webinar today because we have some amazing experts that are going to share some powerful information with us about the vaccines. And I don't know about you, but I need all of the information I can get. I will be asking questions of the experts, and I hope that you also do the same thing so that you can be as informed as possible when it comes to your time to decide, are you going to get the vaccine? Are your children? What's going to happen? How's this going to roll out? I have so many questions, like, is this vaccine going to be, is it safe for my children? Will my children have to take it? Was this vaccine tested on people of color like myself and my family? I worry about the impact if not everyone participates, but quite frankly, I have this little nagging feeling of, is this vaccine safe? What is it that we're actually putting in our body, and how is it that that this is going to be able to keep us safe and keep us back to normal? Quite frankly, history has showed us that the treatment of Black and Brown folks in medical advances has not always been good. And it's still on my mind, heavy on my mind. And that's one factor that I take into the consideration when I'm trying to decide if I'm going to participate or not. And we still see inequities in our everyday life, right? So we started off the segment by addressing what is going on in our nation. Yesterday, I experienced a roller coaster of emotions as well, as Jametta and Christine were talking about. And I'm sure many of you listening did as well. I started my day anxiously watching the outcome of the Georgia runoff elections in the morning, and I was so inspired by the resiliency and the courage of the leaders that boldly ran and won for the Senate seats in Georgia. It was the Black voters, the young voters in Atlanta, in surrounding areas that made those victories happen. Black voters, people of color, tireless work of organizers, all of that was so glorious. I was so proud in that moment, that morning, yesterday morning, that our voices of Black and brown folks were finally being heard. But then the roller coaster derailed in the afternoon. I was glued behind my television screen in disbelief and disgust and quite frankly, in pain to see the riots that were occurring in our nation's capital. The voters made their voices heard during the last election, but evil and hate continued to challenge it. And as Jametta and Christine mentioned, we all know the scenario on the news feeds would have been much more differently if the people in the Capitol were Black and brown folks. At the end of the day, I was proud to see that the people's voices had prevailed. Democracy prevailed. We still have so much work to do for our future, but please stay strong, mi gente. Please keep fighting, and I love you all. Gracias.
Thank you, Cindy. And thank you for that note about love, because it is that emotion that moves us to do this work and to be engaged with you and to try to be a channel for parents and youth in the community, many of you who are highly informed, but may not get a chance to actually listen in on some of the press conferences, that we are blessed to be able to have a dynamic set of leaders at our state level, at our city level. And so we're here as supporters of that information flow, and we are asking you, wherever your young people are, which includes your elementary age children, is to join us in this, because as we all know, information and knowledge is power. And so we're delighted to please make sure that you get your questions or your chat information to us. We're going to move into our first segment, which is consistent with everything we're talking about. When we talk about truth, it's how do we educate ourselves so that we can discern, so we can better understand how do you find information and how do you know the difference between a truth and a lie? Because a lie is repeated so many times does not make it truth, nor does it make it a fact. But how do we understand that if we don't value education? So we're very pleased to have return to us leaders in our education community, which of course is Dr. Nikolai Vidi, who's superintendent of the community district for Detroit Public Schools, and also Rajeshri Bhatia. Rajeshri has a very important role working with Grand Valley State University and the Authorizers Council, specifically working with all of the charter schools that are part of the city of Detroit. We'd like for the two of you, if you would, to come on screen. And we have a couple of questions. I'd like to start off asking you a generic question, and then we would love to have Dr. Vidi first, if you would answer it, and then Rajeshri, and then Dr. Vidi, feel free to share some of your comments and updates, and then we'll have an opportunity. We'll move it forward then to Rajeshri. You can do the same, and then we'll have some questions. So the opening question for the two of you is consistent with this reality, which is, what is your advice? What is your thinking about? What are the conversations that parents and grandparents and adults need to be having with our children and our youth about what they have witnessed yesterday in particular, but in general, relevant to our voting rights and change? Dr. Vidi?
I would say that children are watching. They are aware of what's happening, and they shouldn't be shielded from it. I think this is an opportunity to have a real honest conversation, a continuing conversation. And I don't think it should just be one conversation. I think these are the realities that have been present in our country for, since its inception. And I think we all have been dealing with the inconsistencies of fairness, equality, racial justice, social justice at different levels and different consciousness levels. Mm-hmm. But I would say over the past 4 years, because of irresponsible leader in President Trump, a lot of these issues have been surfacing more to the level of the media in our society in general. So the inequalities, the insensitivity, the inequities are now being discussed more consistently because the president's leadership has brought forth a level of racism that has always been present, but it been hidden. And I think now is the time, as it always is the time, to have the conversations about feelings, emotions, passions with children. And it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be frustrated, but it's also important to keep the conversations about facts and historical facts and lead students in that direction. And I think that's important for parents, grandparents, family members, but especially educators in this space. And I think it's important to keep respect constant, where all opinions matter and all opinions are respected, that even when having differences of opinions, that everyone's opinion is respected, but we root the conversation in facts. The conversation analysis has to be continual. And then finally, I think it needs to move into action. And, I think, I tweeted and I've been talking a lot about what happened in Georgia because I think what Stacey Abrams has shown more than anything, that you can have a vision, but what's important is that you have a strategic plan linked to that vision. And I think she has shown that in this country, despite its history and despite its challenges, when you have a plan and mobilize people, you can actually see change happen even in a place like Georgia. And I think that's an important history lesson already, in a recent history lesson, if you will, that we have to tell today's young people that it can happen, that we can be angry, we can be frustrated, and we should be, and those are legitimate feelings, but let's not stay in a place of hopelessness, and let's move to a place of action. And I think Georgia's recent history and the turning of those two senators and moving the state to support a Democratic president is really telling about what can happen throughout this country.
Indeed. Thank you. And thank you for that emphasis on facts and respect. Rajeshri Bhatia, welcome back again. Rajeshri, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with what Dr. Vitti said. And I think importantly, it is important not to shield students and children from this. I have a 5-year-old who came into the room yesterday while I was watching CNN and asked what was going on. And when I explained it to her, she said, "Mom, that's just not nice." And I said, "You're right, it's not." And one of our charter leaders sent a message, really sort of emphasizing the importance of character. If this country was founded on a belief that people can believe different things, but part of acting as a good citizen is to exercise civility and do so in a respectful manner, as we've talked about. And so I think for kids also, it's important for them to know what they have under their control. And they have under their control the ability to respect. They have their control to develop their character and act in a manner that is consistent with who they are and what their family believes. And I think that's something we have to remind students, right? Unfortunately, right now, there are adults who are not exhibiting or not being good role models of that. And whether that person is, stealing things from the Senate building or sitting, somewhere in the White House, wherever they may be, we need to help our kids see good role models of how to behave and how to agree when we disagree. And so I think that's an important thing that we need to continue to, in addition to everything Dr. Vitti said, we need to continue to help students and kids learn in a way that they can then, in the future, not repeat what we're seeing right now. But it's also important for them to feel empowered. Just because adults behave a certain way does not mean that they need to. And they can exercise their own levels of respect, show respect to each other, and behave in a manner that is far superior to what they may see around them.
Indeed, we look to each generation to learn from the past and to improve upon that. Dr. Vitti, if you would give us some updates, where is the district when we're looking at the issues of going back to face-to-face, online learning, and certainly your thoughts about the vaccine rollout. And Rajeshri, that would be the same perspective that we would kind of ask you to do as well. Dr. Vitti?
Sure. So as you know, and hopefully those that are listening, we've used data and science going back to the summer to say when and if it was safe to return to in-person learning. And back in the summer, when the positive infection rate in the city was at 2%, 2.5%, we said that was safe enough to offer the option of in-person learning. There was some resistance to that, and it was never about imposing in-person learning, but it was about offering that as an option. At the same time, right around Thanksgiving, right before Thanksgiving, actually, mid-November, early November, rates were increasing. And even before the governor made the decision to suspend in-person learning, we had done it in DPSCD because rates were rising well above 5%. So right now, as of Monday, Tuesday, the city's infection rate was at 7%, and the state infection rate was at about 9%. We still think that that's too high for in-person learning. We want the number to get down to 5%, around 5%, and stay there and continue downward before we open back schools for in-person learning. So right now, it looks like rates are declining, but I would not get overly optimistic. I think we may see rates tick up when individuals are coming back from the holidays to work, students in other districts going back to school. So we're going to continue to monitor the rates, but once they go down to 5%, we're hoping that's mid-January, late January, we'll open the schools back up as learning centers. Again, that's an opportunity for students pre-K to 12 to come back to school and learn online, but in the school building with district employees there to support them. That'll be the first phase of reentry. And then if rates are below 5% and stay, then we're looking to restart in-person learning early February, mid-February is the thinking. Parents should be ready to receive the survey that they took at the beginning of the year for their preference for in-person learning or online learning for the third quarter. The third quarter for us begins the beginning of February. The survey will be accessible next week. The same way that, again, the survey was accessible over the summer going into the beginning of the school year, and parents will have the option to complete the survey. It'll be, a 1 to 3 question survey where they can say they prefer completely online, completely in person, or a hybrid, a combination of the two. We'll also be asking parents whether their in-person learning option would change in the future if they had access to the vaccine. We want to start to get some data about that issue from our families as we move forward and think about the fourth quarter and in the summer and next fall. So that's an update on the status of return. We learned really through the governor's announcement the other day that K-12 employees will have access to the vaccine starting next week. I will be honest and say that the details of that rollout has been frustrating to obtain. I think the city and the city's health department is doing the best they can to operationalize and organize the vaccine rollout effort. I'm being told, and what I know right now is that the city's health department will not directly administer the vaccine to K-12 employees. Instead, that will be done by CVS and Walgreens. The details of that, I don't know. I'm trying to obtain those now. In fact, I spent most of the day yesterday tracking down people to try to get information because everyone is eager to find out about how to access the vaccine. But I do feel confident and saying that it'll be CVS and Walgreens. It'll be accessible, to my understanding, to all employees, from district level employees, central office, to school level employees, from teachers to paras to administrators. We're going to have to figure out how to have access to our contractors, like our bus aides or our bus drivers and our custodians, and we'll figure that out. So to be clear, DPSCD is not administering the vaccines, but we're going to work with CVS and Walgreens to do that. Right now, it is not my recommendation to mandate the vaccine for our employees. It's our position right now to just make it accessible. And then we'll continue to survey and poll our employees about their feelings about the vaccine and then move forward. I believe that we're going to see a movement at the state level and even at the federal level with President-elect Biden taking office to try to move to reopen schools by the spring, definitely by the fall. And the vaccine is part of that effort. I think that's easier said than done. Knowing that our employees are not necessarily overly enthusiastic about the vaccine. There's maybe a 20, 30, 40% of the population of our employees that are willing to take the vaccine. That's my sense right now. And I think that those numbers might be even lower for our parents / students. Everyone has to keep in mind that the vaccine, it's 2 administrations of it, if you will. There's one vaccine, 1 shot that's taken, and then 3 weeks later, you have to take a second shot to complete the process. And I think that will be explained in more detail. So I'll leave it there for any questions and issues, but that's where we stand right now about just coming back to school in person and the vaccine. The other thing that I'll point out is that I had said at the last call that we're creating an online task force. We have quite a few applications from students, from parents, community members, teachers. The application for that closes on Friday. By next week, we should be able to name the task force, and we'll start getting into issues like continuing to look at grading, the amount of assignments that we're giving as well. So that's it. And again, I'll be open to any questions or issues that I may have missed.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Vitti. Rajeshri, if you could give us updates from the charter community on the same, please.
Sure. And much of it is going to be very similar in terms of teachers and vaccinations and access, et cetera. And most of the charter schools in the city, even if they were offering or are offering in-person learning, have taken this week as a virtual week, simply to let things kind of settle down. And we'll those that are offering an in-person option will open next week for the most part. And much like Dr. Vitti described, all of our charter school boards are taking into consideration all of the data that's available to us, as well as parental feedback and teacher feedback as they make their monthly decisions as to when to offer or if to offer in-person learning. There are a few schools that have maintained in-person learning throughout the year as an option and continue to do so. And their numbers, from what I understand, have been consistent. So the parents that opted into that are sticking with that, and the parents that opted into virtual are sticking with that as well. And it ranges. Every school community is different, and every school's sort of protocols are tailored to that community. So as I've said before, it's very much a collaborative process. And now once we will all collectively see the impact of the vaccinations and impact of what happens on community health, and then follow similar protocols as we move forward. As far as again, Dr. Vitti mentioned that the DPSCD will not be mandating the vaccine. In our case, every school will have that decision made locally, but similarly taking into consideration teacher feelings about that as well. But on the upside, it's encouraging that we're prioritizing teachers K-12 as part of the initial groups to get the vaccine, because it indicates a commitment to returning our students to educational environments that best meet their needs while not sacrificing safety. So we're happy to see that and look forward to kind of how the numbers progress and to see what happens.
Thank you. Just 2 quick kind of follow-up questions, both of you, when you mentioned about the vaccine. Some of the schools had the benefit of having school-based health clinics or even a school nurse. Is there any thinking or recommendations on your part about how to assure some integration between the existing health resources that are in the schools, relevant to the whole issue of vaccines?
So we were in a position this year when we opened up schools in the fall to either have a full-time nurse or a contracted nurse in every school in DPSCD. Obviously, since we've suspended in-person learning, we've shifted a smaller number of nurses to the technology hubs, parent resource sites that we have running to fix any devices that are broken or to continue to provide medical support. To be honest, at this point, I've raised that question and the opportunity because I actually believe that accessibility would be better if we offered the vaccines at our schools for our employees. But we haven't had the opportunity to have that logistical conversation yet. I've mentioned it, but there hasn't been a commitment. It appears as if state officials and city officials are more comfortable with relying on CVS and Walgreens to administer the vaccines directly and not use our employees or our contracted nurses. So my instincts tell me, at least initially, that everything is going to have to happen at a CVS or Walgreens site until either it's recognized that that's not going to reach at a high enough scale, or supply can meet demand for the vaccine. But initially, it looks like one would probably have to set up an appointment at a Walgreens or a CVS in Metro Detroit in order to gain access. But we're still working on those details. And honestly, people's questions and demand are running faster than the plans and rollout at this point. And I've said it a couple times, but I just want to repeat: DPSCD does not have the vaccine. We don't have it in our central office at the Fisher Building. We don't have it. It's not.
Don't have those cold freezers, do you?
Yeah,
okay.
It's not here.
But thank you for clarifying that, because
But
there can be people who are misinformed.
Oh yeah, no, we do not have the vaccine. I don't know how we would feel about having it in the first place, but no, we don't have access to it. We believe that it's our role to create awareness, educate everyone about it, to help the health department do that, promote accessibility. I can envision hopefully maybe creating vaccination days, on Saturdays and Sundays, evenings, for employees to come to different sites. That may make it more accessible and recognizable, but at this point, there's no concrete plans to do that.
Sure. And Rajeshri, but I do want to let the viewers know that in addition to these questions that our educational leaders are having, we're very pleased that we're going to be joined very shortly by Robert Swanson. Bob Swanson is the Director for Immunizations for the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and can certainly hopefully bring some clarity on a number of these issues. So please make sure that you stay tuned, or if you have questions, get ready to put those into the text or chat. Rajeshri, your thoughts relevant to any of the health resources quickly.
Similarly, I think that the best thing that the schools can do is provide education, provide communication, be a conduit to make sure that folks have the information that they need. Our schools also do not have any vaccines. We'll certainly work with the health department to share the information as it becomes available. But as we know, this is relatively new information, so we're sort of fixing the flat as we're driving the car, so to speak. Happy to hear that happy to hear that this is where we're going, and we're also awaiting the details as to the how this is going to happen.
Okay, great. Well, in the interest of time, we're going to get ready to move to the next segment. But before doing that, Christine, do we have any burning questions for our educational leaders?
So the one burning question, because I think there's two questions that have come in, but one I don't actually think they can answer about the governor's priorities related to youth workers and after school program providers. But the other one was about whether DPSCD will make the vaccine mandatory for teachers and staff. And I think I heard Dr. Vitti say that you'll make it accessible, but not mandatory. Do you want to expand at all around why you may or may not make it mandatory?
Yeah. So we have been told that legally DPSCD is in a position to make it mandatory. Now, where I'm at right now, and this is just me authentically talking and thinking out loud, I'm not comfortable making that recommendation right now to the school board. And the reason for that is I know that there's a great deal of uncertainty and sensitivity around the history of vaccines in this country. The fact that, right or wrong, but the reality is the vaccine is linked to the Trump administration and its creation. There's questions about, was it properly vetted? I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I know that's what our employees are saying. I know our parents are saying that. I know our students are saying that. So I feel I have an obligation as the superintendent of DPSCD to echo those concerns and to be sensitive about that before making it mandatory. So right now in this phase, it's about accessibility and it's about opting in and not requiring it. I think over the next couple of weeks, months, as the rollout occurs, when we see how many people are voluntarily taking it, what are people's issues, concerns, is there legitimate 100% accessibility? What's the timeline to do that? Working with the Detroit Federation of Teachers and our other unions will allow us to better understand if and when it should be mandatory. But one thing that I'll say right now is if the hospitals in Detroit and in Metro Detroit are not requiring doctors and nurses to take the vaccine, then why in the world would I, as superintendent DPSCD? I mean, that's a simple baseline fact that I think as a reference point, I'm using it from a logical point of view. So it's about accessibility. I do know I've heard directly from teachers and staff that they are excited about the vaccine and they're willing to take it, but I wouldn't say that that sentiment is reflective of even half of our employees right now. And so that's where we stand. And I'll also address this issue because some students have reached out to me. It's my understanding that the vaccine eventually will be made available to those students above the age of 16. But that will happen later in the rollout in the phases. I think the city is going to own the administration of the vaccine to the elderly in the city, to the homeless, and to city employees like firefighters, DDOT workers, etc. But again, CVS and Walgreens will take the lead for K-12. As far as nonprofits that help that work with students, and that was not clarified to me one way or the other on some of the initial conversations, but that's likely to come up as a discussion point, maybe on the latter end of trying to get to all K-12 employees.
Okay, thank you.
And then, oh, sorry, one came in. So, and I'm not sure that I'll ask it. I'm not sure that you'll have an answer for it, but is there a particular number or a percentage of employees that should be vaccinated in order to open schools back up?
No, I have not heard that. I don't believe we will ever get something like that, and I'll tell you why. I can honestly say that based on the conversations that I've had directly or indirectly with federal officials and state officials, the general feeling is, and I'm not saying that I'm abiding by this, but the general feeling is as the vaccine becomes more accessible to K-12 employees, there'll be a greater push to open schools back up and keep them open. And so I think we're going to start to hear this more even at the state level in Michigan. by our state leaders. I think that's coming this week and in the weeks to come. And that's linked politically, right or wrong, to President-elect Biden's effort to reopen up schools in the next 100 days or so. So part of that strategy and solution or acceptance is the accessibility of the vaccine. So I would say Michigan, the city of Detroit is going to have to really ramp up accessibility, awareness, education around the vaccine if we want to get any close to scale with the vaccine. But my general feeling is that people will start saying, well, you may not be required to take the vaccine, but you have to understand that it is available to you. So with that being the case, why wouldn't you be willing to go back to in-person learning? Again, I'm not carrying that message right now, and I'm not pushing that. I'm saying that's eventually going to happen. Where I'm at right now, and I think the school board is comfortable with, is we want to be consistent with our original thinking about when it is safe to open for in-person learning. And that's based on the infection rate of 5%. That's the standard that we took. And I think even accessibility initially to the vaccine doesn't change that for me. Now, once we see greater accessibility and people opt in or opt out, I think, and we're, at or below 5%, I think it's a different conversation. But I honestly don't see that happening until the latter part of this school year and not until the fall. So I am not going to, just to be direct, I am not going to advocate for 100% in-person learning this school year, even if rates are below 5%. And I honestly don't see myself doing that even in the fall, to advocate for 100% required in-person learning or in-person work for teachers in the fall, unless things dramatically change regarding accessibility with the vaccine or acceptance of the vaccine. That's where I'm at right now.
Okay. Christine, if I may, we are really needing to hear the questions, but then we actually need to move to our health folks who can hopefully shed some light on this. But was there one other?
No, that is it.
Okay.
So thank you both so much. It's always a pleasure to have you both.
Yeah, it's a delight, and I can forecast for you. There were some other areas that we would love to hear some more information, specifically about what have been some of the online improvements, and in what ways have the efforts of engaging parents to better understand and help to navigate not only the technology but the demands of trying to do their own job, oftentimes with limited devices and access, and work with their kids. So those are conversations we would love to be able to continue to have with you next week, as well as a focus on attendance. So thank you again, Rajeshri and Nikolai Vidi. It's a delight to have you as always. We're going to move forward to our next segment, which is really a focus on vaccines. We know there are burning questions out there. I don't mind saying that just as there are many questions, the nature of science is always both an exploration as well as helping to come up with solutions. So while we have our scientists with us and we have people who are responsible for interpreting and guiding our public policy in that, families, let's all be aware that as marvelous as they are, they may not have all of the answers right away. And so, Dr. Fuller, I saw you smile when I made that point, because I think sometimes people forget that. So viewers and families, we are delighted to welcome back Dr. Ovetta Fuller, who is at U of M and has done a wonderful job working with us to better understand the nuances of this disease, COVID, but now we're talking about vaccines, and there's huge hesitancy. Can you give us some idea of what is in this vaccine and how did it come about, and to what degree African Americans and other people have been involved in its development or testing?
Yes, thank you, Jamita. I'm Ovetta Fuller, and it's great to come back to the 313 COVID Coalition. Again, with all that's happening in our country, you are a shining example of what we want to be like. So we will not have enough time to really talk about vaccines because it's a huge issue. that we don't really don't, we know some things, but we don't know some other things. And I was very happy to hear the comments of Dr. Vitti about the school system. So what I have done is prepared a few slides that hopefully will help answer some of those questions. And I'm going to share those right now so that we can look at a little bit of what's what. And some of these will be just for people to go back and look at again. These are two resources that are about the vaccine, one recently done, and then one about COVID disease and how the virus works, which will be a resource for anyone that wants to look at these. The takeaway message that I want to leave with you this morning is that you must make an informed decision based on learning yourself. And that means that nobody can tell you what to do. This is something you have to weigh the benefits versus the risk for you. And I'll give you my analogy here. The basic take home is that there are unknowns about the current mRNA vaccines, but at 95 effectiveness against blocking disease, which is what the science shows that they do, that is a great place to start. And the analogy I give is that if you woke up from a nightmare or dream and you were standing on a train track and you could realize where you were and you saw that there were headlights, the train's headlights down the track, and that you knew you were standing on that track, you have a decision as to whether you stay on the train track and eventually you'll get hit by the train, whether that'll be slowly or a big knockoff or whatever, but you are on the track. You can either move off, you can jump off, you can step off, but you can't see completely what you're stepping off into. You just know that you're getting off the track. And so the vaccines have been shown to be safe in the short run without any more symptoms than, say, the influenza vaccine, or maybe a little bit more, but we don't know long-term effects. We also know that these vaccines block symptoms and disease, which is a major issue for COVID, particularly severe disease that has our hospitals overrun now. But we don't know about blocking infection. So I was happy to see the comments of Dr. Vitti about the school systems, because we don't know if people who are vaccinated are no longer shedding virus or no longer getting infected. We know the short-term effects are not terrible, which is good. That's what they last within 3 to 4 days. We don't know what the long-term effects are, and we won't know because these were done. They went through the regular process of approval, but we did not look at the long-term effects because it was speeded up due to the emergency use authorization. They are available for ages 18 and over, both Moderna and Pfizer in the rollout, and Pfizer actually down to age 16. And the other thing I wanted to be sure you know that this is just one tool in the toolbox. We still have all those preventions that we have not been using very well. And frankly, for the most immediate future, the preventions, the masks, the watching distance, the staying home are the more effective ways to block infection and to save lives than the vaccines at this point. So I'm going to quickly take you to where we are now. I just want you to see that this is where we were in July, the previous high. This is the surge we're in now that started with the Halloween season and has gone through Thanksgiving and Christmas. And we're up here now where we're having over 230,000 new cases per day. And so this is what preventions will help us do more so than the vaccine, to bring it back down, hopefully to that level where Dr. Vitti was talking about, less than 3%, where we can manage. These are the physical preventions that we know about. And so what we're here today to do is talk about vaccines. There are 2 vaccines, both are messenger RNA platforms that have been approved for emergency use authorization in the USA. And that means that they are used because of the great need. And so those are Pfizer and Moderna. There are others that are in the pipeline, but these have not come up yet for FDA approval. Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca are thought to be the ones that will be coming up next. These videos, which you can go to on your own, will explain the development of the messenger RNA vaccines, what the process is. This is using technologies that have been around. They were just now applied to the coronavirus vaccine. So fortunately, the research was going on before, the vaccine was needed, and that research was applied to the coronavirus to get to the vaccines in an amazing time for science. So this is a huge advancement that took advantage of research that our tax dollars have paid for many years. The thing about vaccines that I want you to know is that vaccines are preventative, a wonderful way of preventing disease that must be given before the disease occurs. And they can be given once, or for some, they require multiple or booster shots. The 2 vaccines we're talking about require 2 shots. They are not, however, like the smallpox and yellow fever and measles and mumps and other vaccines that we're used to. And what do I mean by that? I mean that we do not know that these vaccines will prevent disease for the long term. If you get a measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, you know it's safe and you know that you will not encounter those, that you're protected. We don't know those things for sure for the COVID-19 vaccines. We know they're safe short term, and we know that you're protected, 95% protected in the studies against COVID severe disease and symptoms. So what has been done is we've looked at the efficacy to protect against symptoms and disease and the safety for short-term side effects. We are now looking at the contraindications and the long-term severe effects. Here's the normal process, and these vaccines have gone through this process. These are the ones in the pipeline. There are now 2 that have been approved for emergency use, which means that they can be used under the circumstances of this pandemic that we're in. But note that there's some restrictions to that, which we can talk about later. What you need to know about the vaccines, these are lipid vaccines. They're in a little fat particle where the messenger RNA for one of the binding proteins, the protein that attaches the virus to cells, is put into this little lipid. And that, when it's uptaken by your own cells using your own protein factories, makes the viral protein, which goes on the surface of your cells. And then your immune system sees that and makes an immune response or defense against that one viral protein expressed on your own cells. So it goes into your body, and your body then produces the protein. There's no virus, there's no DNA. It doesn't even get into the nucleus of the cell. So therefore, it is perfectly safe from the point of view of it will never alter your genetics because it's not even getting to that. So we're using a very small fat particle with a RNA nucleic acid inside to inject. But this has to be stored carefully such that we know that the vaccine that's getting to the sites is taken care of and is in good shape. So there's some issues that require high buy-in, because if we don't get a lot of people a high buy-in with this vaccine in both people of color and non-people of color, then we'll never reach the herd immunity that's required by either natural infection, which we don't know how long immunity lasts, or the vaccine protection. And we know that the vaccine protection is stronger than natural immunity, but we don't know how long either of them last. So to build trust, we need transparency, we need inclusion, we need equitable access, which is a question mark. We need trusted people like you have on 313 to help the community engage. And these are all necessary to build trust so that together we can get to where we need to be to have confidence. I'm not going through this, but I'm putting it in here so people can look at it later when they want to review this video, the similarities and differences between the 2 vaccines. Probably most people will not have a choice as to what they take. This is simply to say that the things that we think about when we're making vaccines are safety and storage, the response to the vaccines, the distribution strategy. And these are all questions that I see you have added to the chat. And then we're trying to get to the high uptake such that there is herd immunity. Right now, you may know there's a new variant that's coming out of Great Britain and South Africa. We think that the current vaccine still protects against those variants because the spike protein is very similar on those variants as is on the vaccine candidates themselves. This virus vaccine protects against severe and disease and symptoms, and these are some of those to remind you that we know that COVID can cause huge problems. And so the benefit is that this vaccine, although there are unknowns, is 95% effective in preventing COVID disease, even for a little while. And for me, that's a great place to start. Even with the vaccines, however, we have to remain proactive, because even someone who has a vaccine will still have to wear a mask, will have to still social distance, because we do not know if they are shedding virus or if they can be, how long their immunity will last. And so every person must remain diligent and vigilant. Every person must practice self-care. Every person must model the compliance with the 3 W's that we know. And then again, here are 2 other, this is the same information about resources that you can get to help you understand the decision that you must make to be informed. And they're trusted messengers like myself and others, your healthcare providers, but get a clear understanding so that you can make a good decision or make an informed decision and be comfortable with the decision that you make. So I'm going to stop here. Hopefully that was helpful. And I think we have another person, and then we'll take questions.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Fuller. And thank you in particular for at the end of your comments, you reminded our viewers about the importance of engaging their own medical physicians and community. Making sure that everyone has health care and that everyone is utilizing their primary care provider or getting in touch with them. Everybody needs to have a medical home. That's going to make us healthier as a community overall, and certainly as a way to address COVID. So, but no one really knows that better than our folks that are at the state level, who've had the responsibility of using science to put together plans for our health and well-being. And so in that context, we're really so pleased to be able to have join us today, Bob Swanson. Bob is the Director of Immunizations for the Department of Health and Human Services. Bob, welcome. If you could come on screen, we would love to be able to welcome you to our COVID program. How are you?
I am good. Thank you very much.
Good. And I almost don't want to say Happy New Year, because that sounds so, but we have to do that with some joy and some laughter, because we got a lot of work to do. And so I would love for you to take some time, give us the core messages that you think are important. But one thing, if you could put in the back of your mind to help the audience understand, for example, I believe we've seen in the Free Press and other places, they're ranking our states. Michigan is ranked so wonderfully at the top through the leadership of our governor, Dr. Caldoun, and others in the department, Director Gordon, to keep us safe relevant to COVID, mitigating it. But now with the vaccine, we seem to be really behind in its implementation. And I'm sure that's part of what keeps you up at night. So let me hand it to you, and then we'll see if we have some questions and have some dialogue as we go forward. Please go ahead. Thank you.
That sounds good. Thank you. And thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. As you said, Happy New Year. I do look forward to 2021, because I think we can turn a leaf with the COVID outbreak and we can make some progress. I also want to acknowledge the presentation that Dr. Fuller did. She did a tremendous job talking about the vaccine and the benefits of this vaccine. And really, that's the way through this COVID outbreak. We need to make sure that people, one, understand the vaccine and feel comfortable with the vaccine to be able to get through this COVID outbreak and get finished with this pandemic finally. So I just had a couple things I wanted to talk about, if I could. So first, I want to talk about the vision for our immunization plan. I think it's really important to understand that we are prepared to make sure that vaccines are safe and effective, that they're distributed, and that we monitor and track them appropriately across the state. This is a new technology of vaccine, although I say that lightly, because this vaccine, as Dr. Fuller talked about, this technology has been used in other areas, but it has been in clinical trials for other vaccines as well for a number of years. The vaccines haven't come to market. That's sort of following that slower path to licensure, but it is not a technology that's new to us. We want to ensure that there's transparency and public trust in this vaccine. That's going to be really important to make sure that people are comfortable with the vaccine. We want to ensure that that there's equitable access to the vaccine, and then also making it available to the community when it's appropriate. Unfortunately, we don't have the amount of vaccine that we wish we had, and I'll talk about that a little bit. Dr. Fuller did talk about 2 vaccines that were currently licensed, and we're looking forward to hopefully an EUA application for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine yet this month. That could mean by next month we could have a 3rd vaccine in the market, and that vaccine actually has some benefits in that it's only a 1-dose series as opposed to a 2-dose series, so that could really help us along with our fight against this disease. So the very first vaccine that I want to talk about is the Pfizer vaccine. As Dr. Fuller talked about, is currently available. We have distributed so far 372,000 doses of vaccine, a little more than that. We're working every day to put more orders in as vaccine becomes available through the CDC and Operation Warp Speed. The Moderna vaccine, which came out a week later, you have to remember we're only 3.5 weeks into this vaccination program. And that 3.5 weeks was right at the time that we're dealing with holidays and other things, and a new vaccine that we're trying to get out there. So Moderna vaccine is now available. We've distributed nearly 300,000, about 293,000 doses of that vaccine. They do have some unique challenges in getting these vaccines out because they're stored differently than other vaccines that we've had. You've probably seen it in the press, -70°C for the Pfizer vaccine. That's very, very cold. And so we have to be very careful about how we handle and distribute this vaccine. We are taking vaccine safety very, very serious. I think that people need to understand that we're watching it very closely. There's a couple of systems that are in place to track this vaccine safety. One is an ongoing system called VAERS, Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System. It's a system that's been in place for a number of years to be able to track any adverse events that could occur associated with the vaccine. And we encourage anybody that feels they've had an adverse reaction or a physician that administers the vaccine and sees an adverse reaction that it be reported to that system so we can monitor that across the country. But CDC has stood up a second system called vSafe. This system is something you'll receive or should receive information on when you receive your vaccine. That's a system you can log into on the website, and they will then contact you and track adverse events that you may have. They'll send you a text every day for 6 days and say, how are you feeling? Do you have a fever? Do you have a sore arm? What are the effects? And then continue to follow up. If by a very small chance you did have a serious adverse event, CDC would reach out and contact you and follow up with you to make sure that you were cared for properly. So to date, we have administered quite a bit of vaccine, about 152,000 doses of vaccine as of 2 days ago. We haven't gotten a report yet for today. So even though we think that it's going out slow, within about 3 weeks, 150,000 doses is pretty significant. But in an effort really to be able to increase the vaccine and the availability of the vaccine, I don't know how many had the opportunity to listen to the governor and Dr. Khaldun yesterday. They did a press conference and we initiated opening up the vaccine, trying to make it more available for more individuals across Michigan. Prior to this, it was in what CDC calls Priority Group 1A, which was primarily healthcare workers and long-term care residents and staff. Those are high-risk people. We wanted to make sure we're vaccinated. But now, as of the announcement yesterday, which will be implemented on Monday, we're lowering or opening it up so that individuals who are 65 years of age and older are able to receive the vaccine, as well as certain essential workers. And they include frontline county, state, and federal first responders. So police, fire, that's what we're thinking of. School and childcare staff, we heard that conversation a little bit earlier, and then jail and prison staff. These we felt to be the highest risk to prevent the spread. We also know that individuals 65 years and older account for 80% of the deaths in the state. And so we wanted to make sure the vaccine, as soon as it was available. Yes. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I think you're okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so we wanted to make sure that it was available for those at highest risk. So that rollout has now started beginning the 11th. We're hoping to bring in shortly after that more essential workers once we have sufficient amounts of vaccine. Our vaccine supply right now is relatively limited. We get about 60,000 doses of vaccine a week right now into Michigan. We are allocated an additional 60,000 doses. That's all going to two retail pharmacy chains that are doing all the vaccination in our long-term care facilities. So that's the mechanism we're getting to long-term care, which accounts for about half of our vaccine right now. And that'll last for about 2 more weeks. And then we can pull back and we'll have additional vaccine we can distribute to the public and make available. Our overall goal really for this entire vaccine program is that we can reach and vaccinate at least 70% of Michiganders by the end of this year. It's an ambitious goal, but I think if we want to get past this pandemic, it's really what we need to do and we need to focus on. But in order to do that, I want to make sure people are comfortable with the vaccine. I think Dr. Fuller did a very nice job talking about the process to license that vaccine. And it's important to understand that no steps were, that they didn't skip any steps in the process, that they followed every single step, that they condensed the time frame for it. It was done in record-breaking time, but they did not miss a step, and they had tens of thousands of people involved in those clinical trials to assure that the vaccine was safe. And that now that the vaccine is in the market and administered to millions of people, that we're tracking it so that we're sure that there are no additional side effects. So one of the things that we're doing to try to get it out is increasing the number of provider practices that we'll be able to eventually distribute it to. And so as of today, we have over 1,000 practices, clinics that are enrolled in this COVID program, so we can get vaccine out and available to them and make vaccine available. A lot of that's going to happen once it's open more to the general public, but so we're limiting the distribution right now primarily to hospitals and to local health departments where we can focus on these groups that I talked about just a few minutes ago. So we are making that progress, and I think we're moving forward. We have put together quite a strong educational campaign that's beginning to roll out now to the general public to talk about these vaccines and the need to get vaccinated. And we're hoping that people will feel comfortable with this vaccine and make it available. With that, I think I can stop and I'm open to any questions.
Certainly, and I know that we have some. Could I just clarify a couple items that you illuminated, which I thought were good? So in those first 3.5 weeks, over half of the vaccines that have come in are being administered by the pharmacies, CVS and Walgreens, and targeting our long-term care facilities, which tragically were over 35% of the initial deaths that we had in the state. And that you're anticipating that there will be more primary care physicians that will be involved once there's actually more vaccine available?
Right, that's okay. Right. We want to get this out as broadly as possible. Most of that is going to occur in what CDC defines it as a phase 2. And that's when it's open to the general population. We'd like to make this out and available to any provider practice that wants to have the vaccine.
Okay, thank you. Because access is really important. And we know this is a dilemma for healthcare in general. So one other question before I kick it to Christine for audience. So one of the things that we're very fortunate to have in Michigan are some mobile testing units, COVID. And I'm really delighted to share that Detroit Parent Network helps to work in the Wayne Health COVID313 mobile testing unit. Is there some and there may be some mobile testing units that get launched in other parts of the state. Is the department also looking at ensuring that people who have difficulty getting to their fairly qualified health clinic or getting to their physician, that perhaps these mobile units might be another way of trying to make sure there is equitable access by the people who are struggling the most to get health care?
We have absolutely already had conversations with these mobile test sites, the neighborhood testing sites that are around the state, to make sure that eventually we can get vaccine to them. we've had those conversations now for several months even to try to get this engagement. It's really a supply and demand right now, though, having that vaccine access. The other thing that we're trying to accomplish to make it local, though, I will say, is that we're able to engage the pharmacies. Previously, during H1N, one of the lessons we learned is we did not engage the pharmacies early enough. And that's an easy way. Pharmacies are local and more readily accessible in many times. And so we do hope to engage the pharmacies earlier. That's not the end all solution, but I think it's a help.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Christine, questions from our audience.
We do, we have some questions. So, Bob, with the new, you talked about the new priorities as it relates to vaccination, and it talked about teachers and childcare workers will, after school providers, out of school time providers, youth workers be included in that group of teachers and childcare workers?
Likely not in this first rollout. We really want to focus it with a limited amount to certain individuals. But I think it'll be short behind. I'm hoping that we can expand it to other essential workers that we feel are important.
Okay, great, thank you. And then Dr. Fuller, this question is for you. Would you get the vaccine yourself?
Oh no. Wow. Okay, I should have expected that.
You always get a question like that.
I do. So some of you may not know, but I served on the FDA emergency use panel, the VRBPAC panel for approving these vaccines. I voted no for Pfizer initially and yes for Moderna. And part of that was not that I'm opposed to the vaccines, I just wanted more information. And so would I get the vaccine? Here's what I've said. As a matter of fact, I just got a notice that maybe I'm eligible. So thank you, Bob, for telling us about this change, because I was surprised that I had the schedule there. But yeah, so here's what I've said. I am hunkered down at home. I'm teaching from home. I don't have to go out. My husband and I are here. We're both professors. We can use the preventions that we've been using. There are people who are in great need of the vaccine to protect them against severe disease. So I will probably wait, if I can, until a little bit later, because I feel like I'm able to protect myself now. I do believe they work. I do believe they're effective. My mother, who passed in May, as you know, if she were here now, she lived at home. She had great grands that came in and health providers. I would say, Mom, you're eligible right now. Let's go get your vaccine right now, this day. So I think it depends on your circumstances, at least for me. And I think for the big issue is that we know the danger of COVID-19. We know that it can either cause severe illness or death, or even if it's mild illness, there are long haulers. We know it's overwhelming our systems. So if you can get the vaccine and you don't have any underlying reasons not to, I would say do it. I'm not one out there in the front row, so that's why I'm saying I'm not sure. It's not that I wouldn't get it, it's just that I'm not the highest priority at the moment. Did I answer your question?
You did. I think you did very well, actually, that right now, you know, there is not enough vaccines, and that there will be, but there is, and so considering your situation, that you can use preventative measures. So no, I think you answered it beautifully.
And everybody will have to use those preventions still.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So will there be, and Bob, I think you're best to answer this, and then I have a more general question that either one of you I think can answer. And but will there be an emphasis on vaccinating people who are incarcerated, in addition to jail staff, especially because they are a population who have had a harder time socially distancing themselves?
It's a really great question, and we've had a lot of discussions about that. And where we've landed on, at least initially, is that our primary focus at this point is going to be the jail, the staff at the jail. And the reason for that is they're the people that are bringing the COVID into the jail facility. And so our primary focus at this point is that we get the staff vaccinated, but looking forward to very soon, hopefully, that we can expand that to assure that the residents in the jails and prisons are vaccinated as well. But that will not be in this first group that we're vaccinating.
Thank you, Bob. My daughter is just about to take a nap, so she needed a little hug
I love it.
to get the happy nappy going in the right direction. And this just came in, but will food service workers be prioritized?
Food service are still considered essential staff, but they're not in this first group that we're trying to get to right now. The people that I listed before, mostly correctional facility staff, police, fire, emergency response people, and then, now I'm drawing a blank on individuals 65 and older. Those are going to be our first priority. Somewhere it's hard. We had to draw a line because of the limited amount of vaccine. Even with the number of people that we have involved right now in that group is huge compared to the number of doses that we have available. So we just had to draw a line somewhere.
So the next question is related to efforts to develop a vaccine for children. Do either one of you have information about whether that is going on? And if it is, what is the progress? How's it going?
Yes, so I can answer that. Let me also say, we were told that there will be lots more vaccine available now that Moderna is on, that we have lots more access to that. So hopefully Michigan will be seeing increases in the amounts. And Bob, I don't know if that's really the reality, but that's what we were told at the FDA panel. In terms of for children, the studies are just now or beginning. There has to be IRB approval for these studies, but the studies to look at the effect of vaccine for children and women who are pregnant or lactating is in progress. And that's because there are protections against certain populations for human research. And so they come later than the initial research that was done with adults 18 and older. And so hopefully we'll be hearing about those results in the next couple of months. Say it's certainly by the end of the school year this year, what the impact is for children.
I agree with Dr. Fuller, and I just want to add that I do know that clinical trials did begin down to 12 years of age for the Pfizer vaccine. So at least down to 12, they are looking at that data.
Great. And so I think that the one last question that I want to pose to both of you, and part of this is, there is a lot of information, and a lot of people get their information in an Instagram post or a Facebook post. And there's a lot of fear around vaccines, not generally grounded in science. So what would you say to someone who is nervous about getting getting vaccinated, that has the opportunity to, but is scared or concerned that there's not enough data? What would you say to them?
I can start that conversation if you'd like, Dr. Fuller. So if I were to cut my arm or break my arm or something like that, who am I going to go to get information and how to fix that? It's going to be to my healthcare provider. So I feel that the best source of information is your healthcare provider. That's your trusted person that you go to for health information. So if you're concerned about vaccine, which a lot of people are, talk to your healthcare provider. And then secondly, what I would say is go to trusted sites. Don't trust that Instagram post that you got or Facebook post. That go to trusted science-based sites. We have a really good site up that we partner with in the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. One, we have a lot of information on our website, but we also partner with an organization called the Franny Strong Foundation. Franny Strong Foundation, it was actually built down in Southeast Michigan. It's based on parents of a child that lost their child to pertussis a few years ago. And this mother has made it her mission that she wants to make sure that people have good, strong information to make their decision on vaccines. So the website that they've stood up is called ivaccinate.org. And I encourage you to go there. There's a lot of great information. There's a lot of blogs and things like that of parents talking about vaccines. So I think just make sure that the sites that you go to receive information are science-based and based on what we know about the vaccines. Is there anything you would add, Dr. Fuller?
Absolutely. And I know that I also recommend going to your health provider, but I also know that for people of color, that isn't always the best place or accessible place, or that the insight we get is not what we want. And I also know there's a lot of circulating information in communities of color that we just need to ignore, that are not right, that are misinformation. So I think our goal, and part of the coalition is doing this, the coalition is partly doing this, is getting trusted information out from trusted sources. And so we're trying to get our religious leaders, our community leaders, others who need to get the science-based understanding. There are a number of people doing webinars and talks and various things, me included, to help get that understanding to community leaders, gatekeepers we call them, such that that will be distributed throughout the community. And we can talk about the dis-ease and try to say, what I would like to say is that we know the dangers of COVID-19. We know as much as we can know about it. There's an experiment going on here, both with the disease itself in the population and now with the vaccines. Unfortunately, we cannot say certain things because we don't know. But of those two risks, the risk of COVID-19, we know. And so I would say that the vaccines are something that are part of the toolkit, along with the preventions, which we have not used very well. We've got to step that up if we want to stop this. And so we need both of these, and there are places to get the trusted information and to cut down on the misinformation.
Thank you both so much. And so, Jametta, I don't know if you want me to wrap us up, since we're
I'll just add one item before we wrap up, and I really want to borrow from what Dr. Fuller just said. She said misinformation, and it's a reminder to us that in some ways we've had a perfect storm. We've had a perfect storm where COVID was politicized. And instead of people understanding and listening to the scientists, they listened to others. And that was purposeful misinformation. By the same token, we've seen this manifest also in our political arena. And certainly what we saw yesterday suggests to us that, again, we have millions of people who have been fed continuously misinformation. So, I would share with all of us how critical it is to be focused on educating ourselves, and to our parents that are out there, that you're taking the time to learn and you're building that knowledge muscle in our children, because we must have that, particularly to get through this pandemic, and certainly to bring about the equitable and social justice that we know that this country needs so much. So I want to thank both Bob and Dr. Fuller. We're going to pull you back in with us as we move forward, because this can't just be one conversation. Thank you so much. And I'm passing the baton to you to close us on out, Christine. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. This was really great information and helpful. So we are going to wrap up, and we want to thank not just Bob and Dr. Fuller, but all of our panelists for joining us today. If your question was not answered, we'll get the answers and post them next week on onedetroitpbs.org or on DPTV's Facebook page. We have some asks, like we always do. One, please care for each other in this time. I wish I wasn't saying this in 2021. A bit naive to think that we wouldn't need to, but take care of yourself and take care of each other, and support each other as we move forward in this incredibly difficult time. And then the other ask is, we'd like to announce the Take the Mic challenge. This challenge is asking folks to submit a new way to deliver an old message about COVID-19 safety, just like Dr. Fuller was talking about. And as you can see on the screen, we're also dropping the flyer in the chat. You can visit takethemic.org to submit your message and be entered to win $500, $250, or $100. You have to enter by January 26th. And the first prize winner, again, is $500. The second prize winner is $250. And the third prize winner is $100. We really need a new way to deliver an old message, because this has been a long, almost year, and but we still need to stay vigilant. So those of you that are makers of messages, please submit your messages by January 26th. And as always, I'm going to ask everyone to turn on their cameras and remind our audience that this is truly a group effort.
Yeah.
We couldn't do it without each other. And we want to remind everybody to stay healthy, stay powerful, and stay strong. Ophelia, could you please say that message in Spanish?
Saludables, manténganse fuertes, stay healthy, stay strong, and manténganse y cuídense. Be safe.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Okay, everyone, take